Okay, let's go. So hello everyone, thanks for joining Operate's webinar. Operate is a European project on alternative weed control, so I will just start with a brief summary about this project. So the steps so far, we have been working on Operate for a year now, and we had a survey work and a bibliography work on solutions, alternative solutions for weed control. We worked on needs, gaps, barriers to preventing from the adoption of alternative weed control solutions. We have also been building national networks within the 7 countries we are working, gathered in the project. We had some meetings with stakeholders from this topic, and we also organized several demo events in the countries in the past years. Other events will happen in 2024 and 2025. And now we are entering an assessment phase of solutions. Assessing the solutions will be done through several workshops at different scale, European and national scales, and we will also work on cost-benefit analysis. So today's webinar, you can see the program on this slide. So each presentation will be about 10 minutes. For the presentation, after each one, you will have 2-3 minutes for questions. So to participants, you will see you cannot speak, but you can write your questions in the questions window you have on your screen on the right side, probably. So you can type in your question and we will read loud the question and ask for an answer to the speaker. And you just have to know that in the end, after the webinar, you will receive an email from the platform asking for a short survey, satisfaction survey, and you can also give suggestions for future topics you would like to see addressed. So I will leave the screen now. So Eleanor, that's your turn.
Just to check, you can see that okay? Perfect. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Ellie Dearlove and I'm an IPM consultant at ADAS in the UK. And this morning, I want to share some insightful results that we've gathered as part of the Operate project. Earlier this year, we conducted an online survey followed by focus group workshops, which aimed to gain further insight into the use of alternative or reduced herbicide applications for weed control. We've spoken with farmers, advisors, researchers, and industry and policy representatives with an aim to establish the needs, gaps, and barriers for alternative weed control in the 7 countries that are involved in Operate. This was structured mostly as closed questions in an online survey with some open-ended questions, and then more open discussion in focus groups so that we could get further insight into the results of the survey, which is what I'm going to show you this morning. So firstly, I'm just going to talk through the type of participants that completed our survey. We had a total of 625 completed surveys, and thank you if you were one of those. Participants could be categorized as farmers or as non-farmers based on their responses. And out of the 625 responses, we had 58% farmers and 42% non-farmers. When we then look at the farm characteristics of farmers involved in the stakeholder engagement, there was a range of different cropping sectors represented from small to very large scale production and managed very differently as well. More than 50% of farmers stated that cereals or oilseeds were their predominant crop type, and 50% of farmers were managed conventionally. I will say that the definitions of these management approaches were not provided in the survey, so they are self-defining here. So having a look at the results, the #1 most popular method of weed control currently used from our engagement across all of the countries was the use of chemical herbicides. Nearly 80% of farmers selected this option, and bearing in mind that 17% of the farms were organic, this shows a high reliance of chemical inputs outside of those organic farms. The second most popular weed control approach was mechanical, followed by cultural control, cultivations, mowing and hand weeding, and then less than 10% of farmers selected the remaining weed control options that you can see here. If we look at the use of cover crops specifically, this approach varied across the regions involved, but the lowest percentage of farmers using this weed control approach from our results was in the UK, and the highest was in Sweden. When we discussed the barriers for alternative weed control in our survey and focus groups, it was clear that there are several important reasons why there's not greater uptake of these alternative approaches, and these reasons did differ with region. This table is showing which barriers were a main concern for stakeholders within each country that's involved in Operate, and the most prevalent barrier across all of the regions was perceived cost associated with these alternative methods. Farmers and non-farmer participants also thought that a lack of access to the equipment and a lack of access to information was a huge barrier in most countries, as well as concerns relating to the efficacy of these alternative approaches. If we come back to the cover crops example, when we look at the percentage of farmers that were interested in using cover crops but have not yet done so, the numbers represent a higher percentage of farmers looking at this alternative approach. But there are several concerns which prevented cover crops from being used by these interested participants. And from our discussions, for some farmers, cover crops were seen as complicated, expensive, time-consuming, and may have low efficacy. So in order to address these concerns and increase the use of cover crops and other alternative approaches, our stakeholders identified key areas which need to be improved. These included demonstration events, trials of alternative approaches, recommendations from other farmers and consultants, as well as subsidies for environmentally friendly farming and grants for trials and the purchasing of equipment. And again, the perceived importance of each of these suggested solutions differed across the regions involved. So from these results, you can see it can be difficult to make informed decisions on which management approaches are suitable for you, and if you can't get access to the information required to make those actions. So within the Operate project, we're increasing access to equipment through on-farm demonstrations and facilitating discussions between farmers on different methods that they've used. We're also increasing access to information on alternative weed control methods by creating online training resources, fact sheets, videos, podcasts, and webinars. And with that being said, I'd like to hand over to Professor Daniele Antichi, who's from the University of Pisa, and he's going to talk about strategies of cover crops in arable and field vegetable crops. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Can you hear me? And can you see the slide?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. My talk will be about the agronomic strategies for cover crop introduction into arable and field vegetable cropping systems. First, I'd like to start from the characteristics of these cropping systems. Basically, in arable crops, we have rarely more than one main crop per season that will be in the winter in dry areas or in the spring in more cold climates. This is not always like this, but is a very frequent situation that open the path to summer fallow or winter fallow. And I will show you soon which could be the major traits linked to these bare soil conditions. In addition, arable cropping systems are frequently characterized by very simplified crop rotation with a couple of main crops, leading to soil fertility loss and weed specialization, as well as pest and pathogen problems. And finally, arable crops are normally considered low revenue crop. This means that farmers often seek to reduce production cost. In field vegetable, we have different situations with many crops usually grown simultaneously in different parts of the farm, but in small plots, with a very intensive management due to the short duration of the crop cycles. And this reduces at max the width of the windows open for farmers to prepare the seed bed and also to implement some cultural method for weed control. The consequences of these characteristics of the cropping systems are shown in this slide. Mostly in arable crops, in winter fallow, we have high risk of soil erosion, nitrate leaching, waterlogging, and weed infestation due to the absence of plant cover. And in the summer fallow, the major problem, especially in Mediterranean areas, is huge loss of soil organic carbon due to increased respiration and loss of water due to increased evaporation from soil. In field vegetable, the frequent passes of machinery to manage the weeds and to establish new crops increase the risk of soil compaction, so loss of soil structure, stability, and quality, with consequences both for the soil fertility as well as for the crops. The short crop cycles make it hard to control the weeds and increases normally the soil seed bank of weed species, and reduces at max the time available for intermediary crops like cover crops. Cover crops are certainly powerful tools to tackle these threats and these challenges. And the first criteria we need to follow to select the cover crop family is the ecosystem services that is targeted according to the local pedoclimatic conditions. And normally we have grass species mostly linked to biomass production, weed control, and carbon input ecosystem services, whereas legumes are mostly linked to nutrient cycling. We should also consider the opportunity to combine different ecosystem services by growing cover crop in mixtures, increasing the resilience of the cover crops against climate stressors, for instance. But we should also deal with increased complexity from the point of view of management of the cover crops. Basically, we can follow two different options in introducing cover crops in such cropping systems. The first one is introducing cover crops in between two major crops as an intermediary crop. And in tillage-based cropping system, normally cover crops are managed as green manure, so they are incorporated into the soil at a certain moment of their crop cycle. And for that aim, we should select cover crops having this kind of traits, like a huge biomass production by the termination date. The other option in conservation agriculture systems is mulching that can be performed either as a living mulch, so keeping growing the cover crops together with the main crop. And in this case, we should select a cover crop with a creeping habit, with very low competition ability with the crops, and stress tolerance. The other option is to kill the cover crop and to keep the residues of the cover crops on top of the soil as a dead mulch. to protect the soil from erosion and weed infestation. In this case, it is very relevant to grow very tall cover crops with long stems and huge biomass at also early growing stages. Here I just provide some examples from our research experience with this kind of intermediary cover crops. In this picture, you can see hairy vetch, one of the most widespread green manures, is a legume providing huge of nitrogen. We tested both in arable crops and in field vegetables, also in combination with the plastic mulch, with a synergistic effect on the crop residue mineralization rate and good level of yields in the tomato crops that you see in this picture. Another option to manage the early veg is to provide a dead mulch, also in arable cropping systems, and legume-based dead mulch is essential, especially for grass main crops like grain sorghum that you see in this picture. In field vegetables, the use of dead mulch is constrained by limited weed control ability along the crop furrow. For sure, this kind of management is to be coupled with no-till or strip-till, as Christian will show you in his presentation later. The use of annual cover crops as living mulch in field vegetables can be an option, but especially for winter vegetables characterized by low level of weed infestation and especially represented by not so competitive weed specimens. The other option is to grow in cover crops as intercropped cover crop growing together with the main crop at the same moment. And in this case, we have two different paths. The first one is to grow cover crop as temporary intercropping system in which the cover crop at a certain moment of its cycle is green manure into the soil to provide facilitation and services to the main crop. In this case, you see a legume that was a green manure in between the rows of durum wheat to provide extra nitrogen and weed control. The other case is to grow cover crop as permanent in permanent intercropping system, where several main crops like field vegetables can be grown on the same cover crop, long lasting over years. In temporary intercropping system, another option is to establish what we call relay intercropping system, where no termination of the cover crop occur, but simply there's a difference in the crop cycle of the main crop and the cover crop. This means that the cover crop, like in this case, we have red clover undersown in durum wheat, the cover crop can survive the main crop harvest, and we stay longer on the field, the soil surface, providing additional soil cover during the summer and during also the next fall, providing also other services and biomass for green manure. Here you can see the picture of the same system just before the wheat harvest. Some other example of this kind of strategy can be the use of annual self-reseeding legumes in combination with field vegetables, like in this picture. We are testing several species of self-reseeding, but also perennial living mulch to establish a continuous soil cover on top of the soil, where we can do direct transplanting or direct sowing of the field vegetables. Contemporary sowing or transplanting can be challenged because we can have early competition leading to huge crop yield reduction. For temporary intercropping systems like durum wheat and grain legumes, we should timely do the green manuring of the cover crop in order to enhance nutrient availability. And we had successful experience in increasing a lot the grain yield and also the grain protein content of wheat in such systems. And when we want to establish permanent cover cropping and intercropping system in field vegetables, it's essential to start in advance with leaving enough time to the cover crops to establish well. Then we can manage the cover crop in order to reduce its height and its competitive ability against the main crop before establishing the field vegetables in this cover crop. In this picture, you can see cabbage established within a permanent living mulch of white clover. Yeah, I'm closing my presentation. Here I just report in green some potential benefits of the different strategies and the different management options of cover crops in arable and field vegetables. I think that we can keep this slide open for the discussion, and I will be glad to answer some questions.
Thanks, Daniele. So for now, there are no questions, so we can wait a bit more. Otherwise, just feel free to write your questions and we can read it a bit later if you're still thinking about it.
Okay.
Okay, there is one question. So, Daniele, what species work best for in-crop green manure?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. What species work the best for crop green manures?
For green manures, as I said, we had for legumes, we had very good results with the use of early veg. That is our best legume cover crops in at least in Mediterranean country. It can fix up to 200 or even 300 kilos of nitrogen, and he owns a very huge biomass productivity, and also is weed suppressive because of allelopathy mixed with competition for resources. But I guess also because of the climate conditions, the best options when we grow green manures is to establish mixtures between legume cover crops and grass species, at least, in order to balance the carbon nitrogen ratio and to have more adaptability against climate stressors like water bombs or extensive drought period. By summarizing, I can say that mixtures of legume cover crops such as early veg and grass species such as rye, for instance, or barley can be one of the best options to tackle with climate change and having stable results when using the cover crops as green manure in both arable and field vegetable cropping systems.
Thank you, Daniele. There is another question before handing over to Ilias Travlos, I think. So, is Canavalia ensiformis or Canavalia brasiliensis or Mucuna pruriens used in Europe?
I don't think so. I never test these tropical species. We tested some years ago Crotolaria juncea. That is a promising summer crop because in the Mediterranean areas we are looking for also options to grow cover crops also in summertime. So we need to find out drought-resistant cover crop, especially legumes. The only summer legume I heard about and I tested also in my previous experiments was vinha, so the cowpeas that are quite good as well. And crotalaria sometimes can give good results, but I never test the other species like mucuna. And as far as I know, there are no extensive experience on these species in Europe. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Daniele. So I think we can start now Ilias Travlos' presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Camille. Good morning to everyone. I'm Ilias Travlos from Agricultural University of Athens. I will talk to you about the role of cover crops, diversity and complementarity. Sorry, on weed management and ecosystem services in perennial crops. So we will change a bit the topic of my good colleague, as Daniele described before. I think Daniele said everything, talked about everything here. A few things to add or to summarize. Cover crops, very well known, have gained popularity lately, especially mixtures. And here in this table, you can note the different identities and the different characteristics that several functional groups of plant give. So we have cereals with high biomass production, rapid growth, some other things regarding soil ecosystem services, erosion control, for instance. Some of them, with the exception of oat, are tolerant to low temperatures. On the other hand, we have legumes where we can see various effects, an excellent nitrogen fixation, but relatively of low with competitive ability, I would say. And we also have brassicaceae members, crucifers, with a high biomass production, light interception for the weeds, and some good effects on the soil as well. In general, we could say here that, okay, for annual crops and like the ones that Daniele mentioned before, the cover crops are often established before the establishment of the main crop, or they can remain, they can coexist for an interval for a period with the main crop. However, in the perennials, in vineyards, in trees, we do not have the privilege to establish the cover crop before the crop. I mean, the main crop is already there, and therefore cover crops are usually established in the fall between the rows in order to exploitate winter rainfalls, no need of irrigation for them. And of course, it is crucial to terminate them before the reproductive main crop growth stages, meaning to avoid the competition with the main crop. Some issues here regarding the functional complementarity I was talking about before. It's a relatively new trend to try to combine species in mixtures in order to increase the productivity of them and also suppress the weeds. Some of them offer a higher growth rate, as I said before. Some of them they enrich the soil with nitrogen. Other have a more intense effect against weeds, and all of them could operate, could work as a result of synergism, I would say. Here you can see some examples of species of some of the pictures are from our experiments in our field trials in Greece. In perennial crops, you can see that we have monocultures of cover crops or companion crops, or say as you like, since we talk about perennials. And we have some mixtures as well, oat with vets, mustard with vets, and 3 species mixtures. So we want to see how it goes as living malts or as dead malts, because there is effect after the termination as well. So our research objectives of a trial, as I said, that we established for 2 years in Greece, was to, in citrus orchards, to compare the ability of cover crop monocultures and mixtures to suppress winter weeds, to suppress summer weeds, and to evaluate any ecosystem services, and with a special focus on soil organic carbon sequestration. The trial was established in Pyrgos in southern Greece. Some experimental details, I don't think I have to stay here. The dominant species was wild oat, Avena sterilis, Echinocloa crusgrali, barnyard grass, Medicago lupulina, and Mercurialis annua, but we had also some other species. Our experimental design was the one that you see in the table on the left. So we had an untreated control and the chemical control as well, and we had the cover crops either in monocultures or in mixtures of 2 or 3, and you can see the seed quantities as well. Our results revealed some interesting things. First of all, regarding the weed biomass, so the potential weed control that this cover crop could give, these cover crops could give. You can see that there are some differences in the biomass of the several crops, but I would say that the mixture of the 3 species and the mixtures of the 2 species had the highest weed control, both in winter weed species against winter weed and summer weeds. This is an indicative picture of the cover crops and during the growing period. And we had some, I would say, some cause-effect relationships. So we had, when the cover crop biomass was increasing, the result was that winter wheat biomass and summer wheat biomass was declined. So this relationship was something that we have observed in both years in all our field trials. As cover crop, the highest the cover crop biomass, the lowest the wheat biomass. This is an indicative picture of an indicative photo of the mixtures, oat vets. You can see mustard vets in the center and oat vets and mustard in the right. And here you can see that regarding the richness of the mixtures, regarding the diversity of the cover crop mixtures, in general, I would say that cover crop biomass seemed to increase, and winter wheat biomass and summer wheat biomass that you can see here, in general, in the specific mixture, and this is something that I want to highlight, in the specific mixtures, we had an increase of cover crop biomass as the diversity of the mixture was higher. But this is not something that it is valid for any case and any mixture. So I would say that it is a species-specific issue. We also examined, as I said before, the effect of the residues, the dead malts in the weeds. And regarding the organic carbon, the carbon sequestration, as you can see, and in agreement with the observations made by Professor Antichi before, as you can see, where we, in the cases that in the mixtures we had a grass species inside or a monoculture of the grass species, the carbon sequestration was higher. In general, to summarize, if you see the literature, you can see that cover crop mixtures are used lately for in order to evaluate the weed suppression. So we have several combinations tested under different soil and climatic conditions, and in the majority of the cases, you can see a significant effect against weeds. We could say here that the mixture should compose of species that belong to different functional groups characterized by complementarity. However, there are in some cases monocultures of especially of productive cover crops. In some cases, they suppress better weeds than the mixtures. Other ecosystem services we know very well. Daniele said many things before about soil health, about water, about pollination, about biodiversity and natural enemies. There are some very good papers out there to take a look and see what cover crops do, especially in perennial crops. They are very important, but there are some crucial points to take into account. And for carbon sequestration, as I said before, there are some studies already conducted with various results and a positive effect in general of the carbon sequestration due to the presence of cover crops. However, the result, as I said before, is species and taxon specific, I would say. In conclusion, I would say here that the establishment of cover crop in perennial cropping systems offers a valuable non-chemical solution for weed management. And please note that the cover crops can be combined very well with other weed management methods, chemical or non-chemical. Farmers in Greece already try and evaluate such mixed systems, as we say. The results are optimal when diverse cover crop mixtures are used that are composed of species belonging to different groups, as we said. But for sure, further research is needed to evaluate the role of cover crop diversity on weed management and ecosystem services in perennial crops under long-term field experiments and variable conditions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ilias. We have a few questions here for you. Did the mixture of the cover crop stop the competitive weed-seating seed?
Can you repeat, Emma?
Yeah. Did the mixture of the cover crop stop the competitive weed-seating seed?
Yes, I would say yes. And an interesting thing here is that in some other experiments, also in perennial crops, we saw that this cover crops and especially the mixtures can be very effective against some special groups of weeds like herbicide-resistant weeds and also some invasive species. Okay, we saw a very good effect on against herbicide-resistant coniza, for example, or herbicide-resistant lolium inside the perennial crop. So yes, but we cannot generalize the effects and say, okay, in every case we have an adequate weed control. We see that species one by one. This is a case-specific phenomenon, I would say.
Perfect, thank you. We have another question here for you. What was the difference in cost between chemical control and different cover crop mixtures?
Yes, this is a very hot issue. If you were asking this question some years ago, I would tell you that the difference was huge. But lately, as you know, chemical
we can't hear you very well.
Pesticides
Okay.
are getting more expensive as well. Yes? Can you hear me?
We couldn't hear you very well, but it's better now. Thank you.
Okay. I was saying that some years ago, the difference was huge, but now the differences are not so so big, so large.
Okay, thank you. Another question. How important was the method and timing of cover crop termination on the subsequent weed control?
Yes, here is this is a challenge. This is a challenge due to the competition that cover crops can cause to the main crop. Because when we are talking about vineyards, when we are talking about olive orchards or other crops, especially under arid or semi-arid conditions, there you have the risk of being competitive to the crop, to the main crop. However, the timing seems to play a role. The latest you terminate, the latest you keep the effect on the weeds, but you have to find the optimum point, the optimum time to terminate, and this optimum time is not similar, is not common for all fields and all conditions.
Thank you, Ilias. I have another question here for you. Do you have experience of sowing cover crops, annual and perennial? In perennial systems, just like rain-fed. I can't read the question. Camille, can you
I can read
repeat
it.
the question? Thank you.
I have it. So, do you have experience of sowing cover crops, both annual or perennial, in perennial systems like rain-fed olive groves, where you are just managing spontaneous weeds by mowing? Do the sown species survive for more than 1 year, or does it disappear after the first season?
Okay, if I understood well, the question is about olive orchards, and if we have such experience. Yes, we have such experience, and this is the issue here. This is the purpose here, not to make the farmer irrigate the cover crops. The farmer is not very enthusiastic to have something inside the olive orchard and pay attention and inputs for cover crops. So we are talking about definitely rain-fed conditions. And to tell you the truth, even some summer cover crops, some early sowing summer cover crops, in some cases, they may work as well. I mean, to have under rain-fed conditions without any irrigations or with only 1 or 2 irrigations to be able to give an adequate weed control. So we also test in our field trials some summer cover crops as well, like the one mentioned before in the presentation, in the question to Danielle.
Okay, thank you, Ilias. We have 2 more questions and then we will switch to Laure Gontier presentation. So it was both for Danielle and Ilias. It's a question about soil health. So in-field vegetable crops, which is the best system for soil biodiversity and for the provision of ecosystem services, meaning which practice of weed control is better for soil health?
So I can start answering to this question. Yeah, there's no win-win solution. I mean, for every context, every pedoclimate condition. So we should actually know pretty well which are the environmental limitations and opportunities. But generally speaking, the less the disturbance to the soil, the higher the soil health. That's let's say the general rule. So we are focusing much more of our efforts in research activities together with Christian and other colleagues to test these conservation systems also applicable in organic farming conditions, where we establish these long-lasting living mulch and mixtures of different living mulch species in order to reduce as much as possible the soil disturbance. And this increase for sure the soil microbial activity and increase the nutrient cycling, nitrogen, but also phosphorus that is linked, for instance, to mycorrhizal fungi that are in symbiotic relationship with many cover crops. But this should be manageable from practical points of view. So I mean, we should realize a good management of the cover crop. Otherwise, we will have a disservice that is actually a loss of yield of the main crop due to water and other kind of competition. So I guess the most diversified and the less disturbed system, like living mulch mixture in perennial intercropping, it would be the best option. But we need to design an effective system like this.
Thanks, Daniele. So last question. Is the cutting of cover crops at 25% of floration rule of thumb valid here? Do you know this rule? So 25% of floration rule of thumb valid here for cutting cover crop.
Cutting means mowing or crushing, because what we know from the literature is when you manage a cover crop as a green manure, normally the higher the biomass, the better. So reaching at least beginning of flowering is the general rule. If the management considers also the option, instead the option of managing the cover crop as a dead mulch, then you should not cut, but maybe roll by a roller crimper the cover crop. And then what we know from literature is that at least 70% of flowering in forbs and early duff ripening for grass species would be the best to avoid any regrowth of the cover crop.
Thank you, Daniele. So I think it's time to switch to vineyards now with Laure Gontier. We will address other questions in the end of all the presentation in case it's needed.
Okay. Good morning. Is it okay with the presentation?
We have your notes.
You just click on parameter
okay.
the first one. Yeah.
Good.
That's good.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I am Laure Gontier, and I'm working on sustainable soil management at the IFV. Today's subject of my talk is about agronomic strategies for the introduction of cover crops into wine growing systems. Cover crops in viticulture are a huge subject. They are not only a solution for alternative weed control, as we have seen. Cover crops provide ecosystem services that benefit wine growing soils by increasing soil organic matter, reducing runoff and erosion processes, and improving the biological quality and the biodiversity of the soil. But they are not systematically adopted because, as Ilias said, in perennial row crops, they are intercropped, so they are grown simultaneously with the main crop, and there is a related risk of competition for soil resources. So the issue is to find the balance between services and disservices while considering local conditions and objectives of grape production. Cover crops are part of complex soil management strategies with a range of management options that provide levers for action. It is possible to operate on grass coverage intensity. It means the percentage of surface under grass cover over the year on the field by determining spatial structure and duration of the cover. Spatial structure of the cover refers to crop location in the field, full surface, only rows or interrows, or one interrow out of two or more. The choice of the species of the cover is also a part of the farmer's strategy. And as you can see on the pictures, different practices can be combined spatially and temporarily on the same plot. In French vineyards, 64% of plots have already grass cover on all or part of the interrows, while herbicides are used to control weeds under the rows in more than 70% of the vineyards, and only 2% of the vineyard has permanent grass cover under the row. So in a context of reducing herbicide use in wine growing systems, the major issue is finding alternative solutions for the area under the row. The setting up of a controlled cover crop under the vine row could be one more alternative to mechanical weeding, which one is very compelling. But under the row grass cover has been studied by IFB since 2005. But given the low rate adoption, we assume that there are still barriers to its adoption. Our various trials enable us to identify the interests and barriers of an under-the-row grass cover. This practice is particularly interesting because its flexibility and accessibility compared to mechanical weeding, and because it provides ecosystem services and protection of soils. But technical and social barriers remain, such as the need for investment in equipment and the lack of seeding equipment, the interactions with some operation, such as shoot removal or tying up, and there is still a problematic of social acceptance. Because of the short time available, for the rest of my talk, I will focus on the main agronomic barrier, which is the competition for nutrients and water. So total permanent grass cover is the least restrictive practice in terms of work organization. But our agronomic observations in various trials all over the year showed that total and permanent grass cover has a strong and negative effect on the grapevine productivity. So levels for action must be mobilized to find more acceptable strategies with under-the-row grass cover. So what levers can be used to manage competition? The first lever is to manage the percentage of grass cover in the plot. On this graph, we can see that the impact of the cover crop on grapevine productivity is directly linked to the percentage of surface under grass cover. Up to 60%, we can consider that the impact of grass cover on yield may be considered as acceptable. On this recent trial, the control strategy is chemical weeding under the row with permanent grass cover under on the interrows. And we compared strategies with grass cover under the row, where grass cover 1 interrow out of 2 was destroyed at different dates in mid-May, in mid-June, or never destroyed. When under the row grass cover was associated with a moderate early weeding on 1 interrow out of 2, meaning in mid-May, and it corresponds in wine growing system at the stage before the flowering of the vine. Yield and vigor were not significantly different from the control with chemical weeding under the row. So this is an example of strategy that could be a transferable solution for controlled production objective. The choice of spontaneous of sound grass cover is another lever to mobilize. Spontaneous vegetation is made up of local weeds that can be controlled and or destroyed during the vine cycle. And spontaneous vegetation can be preferred as it embodies a costless intercropping option. But on the other hand, choosing sound species can be interesting to reach specific services, such as weak growth, rapid establishment, or the ability to fix atmospheric nitrogen by integrating leguminous plants. So let's focus on this last point. In this example, free assimilable nitrogen in musts is one indicator to give information on vines' nitrogen status. And in this first example, we can see that the addition of perennial leguminous plants to the under the row grass cover improved assimilable nitrogen compared to the use of gramineaceous plants alone. For example, we can see the value of nitrogen in the must for sheep fescue alone under the row, and when there is an addition of white clover, there is a rise of almost 20%. And in the case of dactyl alone under the row and dactyl associated with white clover, the rise is consequent, around 50% more free assimilable nitrogen in the must. In the second example, the grass cover under the row is made of spontaneous cover, and the integration of leguminous plants was achieved by setting green manure 1 interrow out of 2, and so we can see that green manures improved the assimilable nitrogen content of the must compared to interrow spontaneous grass cover. So it's another solution to integrate leguminous plants in the system. Lastly, we also experimented foliar nitrogen fertilization as an offsetting practice on vines with total permanent grass cover. So as our trial from 2007 to 2015 showed that this practice helped to regulate the reduction in vigor linked to the grass cover under the row. So in conclusion, some key points. Cover crops in viticulture are part of complex soil management strategies. They are well developed on inter-rows, but still scarce under the rows. The barriers are agronomic, technical, and social. One of the main barriers is managing nutrient and water competition, but there is some lever to lower it, such as the grass coverage intensity that has to be adapted to local conditions and objectives of grape production by managing spatial structure and duration of grass cover. Grass coverage composition should integrate leguminous plant to minimize nitrogen competition. And foliar nitrogen fertilization could be an offsetting practice in the case of total permanent grass cover. So I thank you for your attention, and I'm ready for some questions.
Thank you, Laure. So do we have all the questions now? We actually had 2 questions, but general ones for cover crops, even for Daniel or Ilias, about mouse and snails in the cover crops. So how is mouse control carried out in coverage with dead mulching? It appears that for a year that's a big problem for the mice, since it lives in the cover crops, and same for snails. There are several problems with this issue. So is one of you aware of that problem? Did you work on that?
Ilias, do you want to reply?
Yes, especially in perennial crops, this is an issue, but not in all, in the majority of the fields, I would say. Again, I would say that this is something case specific, and it depends in various factors. I mean, how much this mulch will stay in the surface, on the surface. How large is this quantity of residues? But in general, I would say that we have observed some effects, but not quantify this effect in Greece, at least, in our experiments.
Yeah, I can add shortly one piece of information from our experience. We had problem with snails in sunflower established by no-till sowing in vetch dead mulch some years ago in a non-farm experiment. And actually there was a problem only when the seed furrow was kept open, so where the soil was too wet at the moment of the sowing, and this could be an option. So there are also direct control means like iron, phosphate that we can use also in organic farming. But I think that prevention and I don't know, maybe integration of chicken or other animals in the system could help. And about mice, I guess if you have problem with mice, no-till is not a good option, or at least continuous no-till. So maybe the good way is to foresee any deep tillage like chiseling to disturb the mice like once every 3-4 years in order to reduce the mice density, and then maybe to establish a more conservative system.
Thank you, Daniele. So now we have 2 questions for vineyards for Laure. So do you nitrogen applied by legume? So about nitrogen application by leguminous, can it reach an undesirable effects in increasing vigor in vineyard? So how do you control vigor problems due to leguminous? Oh, you're muted, Laure.
Yes, it's an idea. It's often a barrier to cover crops with perennial leguminous to think that they will improve too much the vigor. But in our trials, cover crops were permanent and total under the row and on all the inter rows. So the competition by the cover was very important, and the integration of leguminous plants was just sufficient to balance the nitrogen competition and to regulate the vigor, and we didn't see any excess of the vigor. So
Thank you.
It was not a problem.
Okay. And there is another question. Have sheep grazing been tried in cover crop management in the vineyard and the benefit they bring with him?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Have you tried grazing by sheep in cover crop in vineyards?
And no, we didn't. But we have we have exchange with farmers, with wine growers that do that, and it is a possibility during winter. The main difficulty is to have on the same place, same region, the sheep available for the and the wine growing. Sometimes it's difficult to find, but it's one option for winter regulation of cover crops until bud burst of the vine.
Okay, so I have one last question and then we will switch to Christian Frasconi. So again, for vineyards, for you, Laure. So are there any cover crops that you can recommend that don't require cultivation before drilling, sowing in order to get a good establishment? So is it you have species for a good establishment without drilling before sowing? And are there any other methods aside from cultivation and direct drilling they'd recommend for the establishment of the cover crops?
So without tillage, that's it?
Yes, yeah.
It's difficult. For cover crops under the rows, the best solution if you don't want to invest in tillage or in sowing is spontaneous vegetation, and all the covers that we have sown under the rows are covers with very little seeds. So it's important to have tillage before the sowing. So the best option is the spontaneous vegetation if you don't want to have tillage. And on the inter rows, it is difficult also to sow without tillage. It's possible. The direct sowing it's an option. It's an interesting option in wine growing systems because it avoids a tillage just before the harvest, because sowing period and harvest in viticulture are in the same time. But we have seen that there is a better efficacy when there is tillage during the summer before the sowing. So it's difficult to have a good cover without any tillage. So, and I can't recommend one species in particular.
Okay, thanks a lot, Laure. So we still have two presentations now. So we'll go with Christian Frasconi.
Here we are. Can you see my screen?
We can see your desktop. Yes,
okay.
That's fine now.
Good morning, everyone. I will talk you about machine for crop management. So, sorry, I have the panel. Okay. machine for cover crop establishment, machine for cover crop soil incorporation, so cover crop managed as a green manure, cover crop devitalization, if you manage cover crop as dead mulch, and cover crop management as living mulch. Okay. Cover crop establishment. We can say that conventional preparation of the seedbed for cover crop with primary tillage, secondary tillage, it's not not so simple for a farmer. So this quite conventional approach could be justified if the following cash crop is sown in no-till soil on the auxiliary crop dead mulch. If we want to simplify the cover crop establishment, a solution could be also to gain timeless, mount on combined cultivator this electric powered pneumatic broadcast sowing machine. Here we are. So this is the hopper. Here we have the metering system device powered by an electric motor. Here we have the fan that can make the flux of air for conveying on the seeding tube the seeds, and the seeds are spread just in front the rear roll, and the rear roll ensure the burial of the seed. So in a single passage we can tillage the soil and seeding the cover crop. The working speed of this operative machine can vary from 7 to 10 kilometers per hour. So we can have a high field capacity in terms of hectare per hour. Regarding cover crop establishing for orchard and vineyard, recently in a project we work on a prototype of seeding machine for differentiated cover crop system. So in this case we have under the row a trifolium subterraneum, a subterranean clover, and a mix of Poaceae and Fabaceae on the interrow. So we use, unfortunately, a mechanical seeder. We provide the hopper of this mechanical seeder with internal lateral partition. So in this region of the hopper, we have the seed of the trifolium subterraneum, and in the rest part of the hopper, we have the mix of cover crop for the interrow. These are the metering device that are powered mechanically by the rear roll. In this way, we have the proportional distribution on the seeds, or the amount of seeds, according with the working speed of the machine. And here we have a rolling acre in order to till the soil just under the row. We have a slide here, a metal slide, so the seeds arrive on the side pipe here, and then broadcast are spread on the soil surface. And with this finger weeder, we want to, we attempt to create a system in order to bury the seeds. The seed of the interrow, for the interrow, fall by gravity to this slide just before the passing of the rear roll. This machine doesn't work so well, but the interesting part of this project is that probably the trifolium subterraneum for our region is a good option for create a cover crop under the row. This is the vegetative stage, and at the beginning of June in our region, the Trifolium subterranean and its life cycle. So it remains this dead mulch just under the row. And this is an interest aspect. Probably this kind of machine could be optimized using an electric powered pneumatic Brostan sowing machine with double hopper and double double metering device. Regarding cover crop soil incorporation, green manure, so we can conventionally we have plow or discard. Here we have a video about PTO powered with opposite motion respect of the tools respect of the wheel of the tractor. And this machine works quite well. We have a good incorporation of the cover crop, but consider that its working speed is quite low, so energy input, fire consumption could be quite high. Recently in Italy is available this machine is mini plow for reduced tillage, so we can have a wider working machine. Okay, I'm quite skeptic about the creation of hard pan just below the tillage, but the manufacturer ensured that the 45 inclination on the plowshare avoid the formation of hard pan. Regarding the cover crop incorporation on vineyard, we can have PTO powered rotary machine or combined cultivator could work also quite well. If we want devitalize mechanically the cover crop, many machines for mechanical cover crop devitalization are now available. They can be divided in cut roller, roller crimper. If we have this blade that is sharpened, we can cut the cover crop and leave the vegetative on the vegetative part on soil surface. And the roller crimper have not sharpened the blade here and create a long-lasting dead mulch because don't cut the stems but crimp the stem, enhancing the devitalization. We have model of this type of machine for vineyard. Okay, we can model for herbaceous and extensive crop. We have high working speed also in vineyard. Well, for reaching 7 km/h, we have to a good tractor driver, but we can say we can reach it. Okay, and in open field we can arrive up to 25 km/h, so high working capacity. We tested in our trial the effect of mechanical devitalization with this kind of operative machine and in combination with flaming. Okay, so a thermal treatment just after the mechanical devitalization. In this graph, we can see the trend of the devitalization, so the loss of green cover along the time. we can see that there are no so much difference between the different type of roll used, but there are some difference if we add the thermal treatment. Okay, we have a faster devitalization, and we arrive at the level of devitalization lower than with the roll alone. But we have to consider the cost of flaming per hectare that are here, 341 euros per hectare. So if the cash crop is, example, processing tomato, and here in Italy for weed control the most used technique is plastic mulch, probably this cost can be sustainable, but in other way, I don't know. Regarding cover crop management as living mulch, there is this special mulcher that with this helicoidal conveyor device cut the biomass and deliver the cutted biomass just under the crop row. Is a quite good technique, but in some cases the wet and fresh biomass of the cover crop can create an environment that could be favorable for pathogen and create the rotten of the trunk of the crop. In other research, we just want to replicate the turf grass management in a living mulch in vineyard. And in order to contain the manpower requirement for the continuous operation of mowing, we use an autonomous mower. This one is an autonomous mower for a little garden, for domestic garden, and but if your vineyard is quite flat, like a pool table, we can say, without no obstacle, we can obtain good result. Consider that this autonomous mover follow random trajectory.
Christian, I'm sorry, it's been over 13 minutes, so I will just ask you to close out quite soon.
Okay.
Sorry.
This is a more professional autonomous mover for vineyard. Pay attention to the purchase cost. Regarding cover crop management as living mulch in vegetable crop, one can ask how you can transplant the vegetable crop in living mulch. We developed a special no-till transplanter. Here is the video. Okay, I speed up. And as in vineyard, we test an autonomous mower, but we have to put some protection on the plant. So in this case, the research work is still in progress. This is my key points, so I'm ready for question.
Okay, Christian, so we will just take one question and then switch to Cristina Micheloni presentation. So in arable crops, have you any experience on possible solutions for combining cover crop establishment with other cultivation operations beyond soil tillage operation, for example, such as the harvest? So they give an example, use of pneumatic seed distributor installed on the harvester.
No, I have no direct experience, but I know that probably in the United States this is a quite promising technique. I have seen some work about it, but I have no experience about that.
Okay, thanks a lot, Christian. So now we will start the last presentation for today's webinar. So Cristina Micheloni is online, but I will share the screen for her. So
Hi, thanks a lot, Emma. Thanks for sharing your screen for me.
yeah, so I'm not ready yet. I'm
No, I'm just occupying the space, the time in between.
Okay. So what screen do you see? Emma?
We can see your desktop.
Okay, so I will try to switch as I did before. Perfect.
Well, I can. Okay, thanks. Thanks.
Yeah.
Perfect. So
okay, you can
very
start,
rapidly. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Very rapidly, I would just like to share with you some practical experiences we have here in the northeastern part of Italy, where I live, where I'm from, namely the region of Friuli Venezia Giulia, but we can enlarge a little bit the area of action. And I have to say that much of the experience we have in the last about 30 years of working with cover crops is totally in line with the previous presentation, and I gain a lot of new ideas and nice suggestions from the previous presentation. So thanks a lot to previous speakers. If we may go to the next slide, please. I would like just to specify a few features of our region that are somehow putting some conditions in the use of cover crops or for any purpose. We used to be the region in Italy with the highest rainfall. We are in between the Adriatic Sea and the Alps, and so the rainfall used to be very high. And so we never consider water as a limiting factor for our crops. We have been growing a lot of corn, in most recent years soybean. We have a lot of viticulture, apple production, not so much horticulture or vegetable cropping, but nevertheless, water was never considered a limiting factor. But in the last years, it started to become a concern. Last year, it was really a shock for us, for our farmers and for the people working in agriculture, because we never experienced such a lack of water availability for summer crops and also for winter crops. So now that is, I put some meteo data here, but we don't need to read them. Anyhow, last year was extremely dry year. This year we have a very scattered precipitation pattern. Nevertheless, the total rainfall was not as high as it used to be. So in the long term, we know for sure we have to cope with less water. What is really uncertain is the pattern of distribution that is impacting, of course, all the crop management, but specifically what we are talking today, it is impacting how, when and how we can sow cover crops and how and when we can terminate them. So we have been used with very vigorous vegetation for many years. I mean, that was the normal situation due to the high availability of water. But that means also a long period with high weed risk or pressure, because rain was conditioning and producing quite the situation where weeds in summer crops had the total opportunity to develop. Last year, due to the drought, we were experiencing something completely opposite. So, I mean, this uncertainty is also conditioning the way we look at cover crops. If we want to be positive, we start also appreciating some other agro-environmental effects and some buffer effect towards, for example, the water being it too much or being it too little. And on the other hand, it's also becoming quite interesting, the potential to buffer the heat waves that we are facing during summertime. Together with the meteo condition, we have to consider also the soils. Of course, going from the Alps to the seaside, the variation of the soil types is huge, but much of the region is characterized by very high percentage of skeleton, so a lot of stones in the soil. And if we consider that together with the fact that we have in organic farming, we do not want to use herbicide, we are not allowed to use herbicides, you can understand how difficult it is to cope with that with mechanical tools. Mechanical tools in high skeleton soils have two problems basically. On one side, they don't perform very well, and on the other side, it's very expensive because the tools should be changed very frequently. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I try to go very rapidly through the three main crop groups we are growing here in the region. If we consider the use of cover crops in viticulture and fruit crops, I think there is quite a long-term experience in viticulture, and it is also somehow contaminating the fruit production, because the experience gained in viticulture is also used in other fruit crops, mainly apples and kiwi fruit. As I already mentioned, initially it was also only considered as a green manure, I mean, supplying nutrients to the crops. Nowadays, other effects are getting more interesting. Dealing with innovation, we are experimenting different materials, different species, different varieties in the use of cover crop, and especially mixes of varieties and of species. We are still looking for good ideas for the use in summer leguminous crops with heat resistance. Crotalaria is something we introduced in the last years, but still, I mean, there is still space for experimentation and for improvement. And considering the challenges, for sure, mechanization that is not only managing the cover crop, but also be respectful to the soil and not too expensive, because on the other hand, we have to cope with many small farmers who cannot invest too much in mechanization. So we are considering also the sharing of machinery, but it's not so simple. So we need some mechanical tools, good to terminate the cover crop, respectful to soil, maybe doing more than one thing at once, but they should not be too expensive. And there, the offer is not really so rich so far. Next slide, please. Considering the use of cover crops in arable crops, well, there is the place where probably we have the longer experience. As I mentioned before, the arable crops characterizing our region are corn and soybean, and with a little bit less interest also winter cereals. So normally the cover crop is an autumn sown cover crop, being it a mixture of pea, vetch, and cereals, or even much more complicated with the use of other species. Nevertheless, the summer crops, summer cover crops became interesting and used in practice a little bit later, mainly for weed management, as a help to weed management. Of course, also autumn sown cover crops are useful as a diversification in the crop rotation to reduce the seed bank, but summer sown or late spring sown cover crops such as Sudan grass, for example, are much more interesting for weed control in summer crops. And Sudan grass is quite efficient. It is very good for weed management, but as a side effect, it is also producing a lot of organic matter. So also in terms of soil fertility is quite interesting. Just briefly, because it was already mentioned before, we are experimenting since many years also with the roller crimper technique. Here you see in the picture in the center a specific roller crimper that we ask to build for us, and it's exactly in the attempt to improve the use in in soils with a lot of stones, where the machines, especially if they go to a certain speed, tend to not to be adherent to the soil continuously. So we were facing some problems with the normal roller crimper in having an homogeneous termination of the cover crop. Very briefly, just a few words, we are experiencing basically roller crimper for corn and for soybean, more recently for sunflower, but soybean is where we have more results, with the rye as a cover crop preceding it. On the other hand, for corn, we are not really satisfied so far. We are still working hard on it, using pea as a preceding cover crop. And in both cases, rolling it and with direct sowing of corn and soybean at third. Next slide, please. Dealing with vegetables, here as well, we have many small farms, and usually they are producing vegetables for direct crops, so it means a huge diversification in terms of species and of moment of transplant. So the cover crop is used on this, as Daniele was mentioning in his presentation, is quite, I shouldn't say common, but it's quite frequently used. But we wanted to apply the concept of cover crop or living mulches and roller crimper also in vegetable production, and following also the experience of some research done here in Italy by the group of Daniele, but also of CREA in the Marche region. But we were facing the problem of how to transplant the vegetable afterwards, and to do it by hand is not an option, being it in greenhouses or open field, even less in open fields. So since 3 years we are working with a transplanter produced in Germany. That is in just, you see the detail in the picture on the right. This machine is able to plant the vegetables in even 30 centimeters of living mulch or fresh mulch, green mulch, and we are experimenting several options for doing that. So far, we had excellent results last year with the drought and with the heat waves. This year, with the more rain, we were facing some troubles in the in the development of the plants, but also with some slugs. So there is still space for work to fit it to our reality, but it's very promising, especially in a changing climate and with the water scarcity we are facing. I think it's really something we have to take into consideration, and we are doing that. I think it would be nice also to cooperate with somebody else working on this mechanization for planting or seeding vegetables in a green mulch or living mulch. I mean, that's room for maneuver we are very much interested on. What are the innovation is, I think I already mentioned them, and about the challenges, again, is the economic sustainability, because we can have many machines, but if the farmer has to pay them back with what they produce, it's not exactly easy. Another challenge is the cultivation as cover crop of species or mixture that can allow to reach multiple goals, being them soil fertility and mitigation of drought and so on. And sometimes these goals can be contrasting. So we really have to work on assessing in depth their potential and their constraints. I think I finished. Can I go to the last slide? I hope I was respecting the time.
Yes, you were.
Can have, great. You can find quite some material from our experience in our webpage and also on YouTube. We produce quite a lot of videos, so even if they are in Italian, I think the video has the advantage that everybody can look at it. And also on Organic Farm Knowledge, that is the platform that we are sharing with other partners at European level, where we store materials about knowledge, practical knowledge in organic farming. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We have one question here for Christian, actually. Where can we have more information about the machine in your last slide for vegetable crops?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can hear you.
For the no-till transplanter.
Sorry?
Is the no-till transplanter is correct? The last slide.
Yeah, the last slide. Yeah.
Is a prototype. We made it. We purchased a normal transplanter and we modified it. If you are interested, there is an article, a scientific article, and then we modified it furthermore. But you can have my mail. If you have any question, I can have more details, more video, more images. So, essentially, we added a disc, a vertical disc, in order to cut the dead mulch or the vegetative part of the living mulch. Then we add a shank, okay, for create the furrow where you have to put the little plant. Then there is the furrower of the normal transplanting machine, and then the two rubber wheels that close the furrow. This is what we do.
Thank you. I don't think we have any questions. If you can just confirm, Camille, but I don't see any more.
We have an additional one that just appeared.
Okay.
So it's again about mulching material. So has anyone studied dead mulching material collection machines to collect outside the crop field? So to collect the dead mulch out of the crop field, did you work on any machines?
Well, we in Friuli, I mean, for the vegetable trial, we also have two options of plant material produced elsewhere. For example, alfalfa cutting or straw spread on top of the soil, and then on top of it, the vegetable plants were transplanted, if that was the meaning.
Yeah, I think it was.
And if the question was what to use to spread it, we use the straw spreader that usually is used in the stables. It's not perfect, but we couldn't do anything else.
Okay, thanks a lot, Cristina. So it appears that for now there are no more questions. So I think that's it for today. So thanks to all the speakers today for this presentation. We will close out the webinar, and to the participants, please, if you have time, can you fill the survey that you will receive afterwards. Thanks a lot and have a good day.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.